Raymond Foster checked his watch for the third time in 10 minutes. The cafe door stood 3 steps away. His escape route mapped, rehearsed, ready. Across from him sat a woman he'd agreed to meet out of obligation, not hope. And beside him perched his 7-year-old daughter, Harper, swinging legs that didn't quite reach the floor. He could leave. Should leave. This wasn't what he'd signed up for. Not the polite small talk. Not the way this stranger's eyes flickered with something too familiar, too close to the loneliness he'd been running from for 4 years. His chair scraped back. Harper's small hand caught his sleeve. "Daddy?" she whispered, barely audible over the coffee grinder's hum. "She looks lonely, like you, when you think I'm not looking." The words hit harder than any business failure ever had. He froze, half standing, caught between the door and a truth his daughter could see, but he'd refused to face. What happened next would change everything, but not in the way he expected. The kitchen smelled like coffee, and the quiet that comes when routines become armor against the world. Saturday morning light filtered through the window above Raymond's sink, catching dust particles that danced like they had nowhere important to be. He stood at the counter measuring coffee grounds with the precision he brought to board meetings, 2 scoops for his cup, 1.5 for Harper's hot chocolate. The coffee maker gurgled to life, marking the beginning of every weekend for the past 4 years, and Raymond moved through the familiar motions without thinking, the way soldiers clean rifles or priests recite prayers. Harper sat at the kitchen table with her legs crossed beneath her, bent over a sheet of drawing paper with a purple crayon clutched tight in her fist, drawing the way she did everything with complete focus, her tongue poking out slightly from the corner of her mouth. Raymond had learned not to interrupt when she was like this, lost in whatever world existed on that paper where mothers still lived and families stayed whole. He flipped 2 pancakes on the griddle, watching the edges bubble and brown, keeping the Saturday morning tradition that Rebecca had started, and he'd maintained because changing it felt like erasing her completely. The coffee maker beeped its completion, and Raymond poured his cup, then made Harper's chocolate, stirring in exactly 4 marshmallows. The big ones, not the small ones, because his daughter had been very clear about preferences. He carried both mugs to the table and set Harper's down beside her drawing without comment, and she reached for it with her free hand, eyes still locked on the paper where 3 figures held hands, stick people with triangle dresses and circle heads. "What are you drawing, sweetheart?" Raymond asked, though he could already see most of it because Harper drew this scene at least once a week, and he'd memorized the pattern by now. Harper was working on the middle figure with lighter strokes, the purple crayon barely leaving a mark on the paper, like she was afraid pressing too hard might make it disappear entirely. "A happy family," she said without looking up, adding details to the fading middle figure with careful concentration. Raymond sipped his coffee and said nothing, because what was there to say that wouldn't break something fragile in both of them? The calendar hanging beside the refrigerator caught his eye, most days blank the way he liked them, but today had writing in blue pen, neat letters that Kevin from work had written there last Tuesday. Coffee 3 Saturday, and beneath it, Nicole Brennan. "Daddy?" Harper's voice pulled him back from thoughts spiraling toward places he didn't want to go. She was looking at him now, purple crayon abandoned, hot chocolate cradled in both hands. "Jessica's mom said you should meet someone nice." The words came out flat, reporting rather than asking, and Raymond recognized his daughter's tell when she was fishing for information without admitting she cared about the answer. Raymond set the spatula down and turned to face Harper fully, giving her the attention she deserved. "Jessica's mom talks too much," he said, keeping his voice light even though Christine's interference made his jaw tight. Harper tilted her head in that way she did when trying to figure out if adults were telling her the whole truth. "She said it's been a really long time since Mommy went to heaven. She said maybe you're lonely." The observation landed between them like something heavy, filling the kitchen with awkwardness. Raymond desperately wanted to sweep away but didn't know how. His daughter was 7 years old and shouldn't have to worry about whether her father was lonely, shouldn't carry that weight on shoulders still too small for adult concerns. Raymond crossed back to the table and sat down, reaching across to tuck a strand of Harper's hair behind her ear in a gesture he'd done 1,000 times. "I'm not lonely, sweetheart. I have you." Harper nodded slowly, but her eyes held something older than 7, some understanding that his reassurance was incomplete. "But what about when I'm at school? Or sleeping? Who do you talk to then?" The question exposed something Raymond had worked hard to hide, the truth that most of his days consisted of exchanges of information rather than real conversations. "I talk to myself," Raymond tried, going for humor because deflection was easier than honesty. "Very stimulating conversations. I'm an excellent listener." He waited for Harper to laugh, but his daughter just looked at him with those eyes that saw too much, then returned to her drawing without comment, adding details to the 3 figures, while the middle one remained faint, a ghost among the living. Raymond stood and began plating the pancakes, 4 for Harper, 2 for himself, trying not to think about the calendar or the appointment or the fact that in less than 6 hours he'd have to sit across from a stranger and pretend to be someone worth knowing. Harper was looking at the calendar too now, following his gaze to that blue pen writing. "Are you going somewhere today?" Raymond set the plates on the table, buying time. "Just a quick meeting. A work thing, kind of." Harper stabbed a piece of pancake with her fork and studied him, chewing slowly while processing this information. "Can I come?" The question came fast, eager, and Raymond felt his first instinct rise up, the automatic no that protected his daughter from witnessing his complete inability to function in social situations. But then he looked at his daughter, really looked at her, and saw something that stopped his refusal cold. She wasn't asking because she wanted to go to a cafe. She was asking because she wanted to be with him, because maybe she sensed his reluctance and wanted to make it easier. Raymond reached across the table and squeezed Harper's hand. "Fine, but just for a little while." Harper's face transformed with delight. "Really? I promise I'll be good. I'll bring my coloring book and you won't even know I'm there." The morning passed in its usual rhythm, Harper playing while Raymond answered emails, and work was easy because work had clear rules and measurable outcomes. At 2:30, Raymond stood in front of his closet trying to decide what to wear, which was ridiculous because he knew exactly what he was going to wear. But somehow he found himself pulling out 3 different shirts, holding each one up to the light, wondering which said, "I'm here under duress but trying to be polite about it most effectively." He settled on blue because blue was safe, because blue said nothing. Harper appeared in his doorway wearing her favorite yellow dress with the sunflowers on it, her hair pulled back in a slightly crooked ponytail she'd clearly attempted herself. "I'm ready," she announced with confidence. Raymond glanced at the clock, 2:40, but Harper looked so eager that he didn't have the heart to make her wait. "We have 20 minutes, sweetheart." "I know, but I don't want to be late. Mommy always said being late was rude." The words hit Raymond like a fist to the chest because yes, Rebecca had said that, had said it constantly while rushing around their old apartment. She'd been terrible at being on time, had lived in constant cheerful chaos, but she'd always aspired to punctuality, even if achievement remained forever out of reach. The fact that Harper remembered this, that she carried these small pieces of her mother and tried to live by them, made Raymond's throat tight. "Your mom was right," he managed, his voice rougher than intended. "Let's go." They left early because staying in the house meant more time to think about all the ways this afternoon could become uncomfortable, and Raymond had done enough thinking to last a lifetime. Stumptown Roasters occupied a corner spot in Portland's Pearl District, all exposed brick and reclaimed wood, windows stretching from floor to ceiling, flooding the space with afternoon light. The Saturday crowd was thick with students bent over laptops, couples sharing pastries. A book club clustered around a large table, arguing about something with friendly intensity. The air smelled like espresso and cinnamon, and a jazz quartet played softly through speakers mounted in corners, creating ambiance that felt both sophisticated and welcoming. Raymond had been here exactly twice before for business meetings, had sat in these same seats discussing contracts. He arrived at 2:55, early by 5 minutes, and chose a table near the window, positioning himself so he could see the door clearly. Harper climbed into her chair and immediately spread out her coloring supplies with the seriousness of an artist preparing for important work. Raymond sat across from his daughter and checked his phone needlessly. 2:57, 3 minutes until this ordeal began. His leg bounced under the table until he noticed and forced himself to stop, to fold his hands on the table, to breathe slowly through his nose. At exactly 3 p.m. the door opened and a woman walked in, and Raymond knew immediately it was her, not because she matched her photo, but because of the way she paused just inside the doorway, scanning the room with barely concealed anxiety that mirrored his own. Nicole Brennan was shorter than he'd expected, maybe 5'4", dressed in a pale blue cardigan over a white shirt and jeans. Her dark hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and she carried a canvas bag slung over one shoulder. She looked tired, Raymond thought, and then immediately felt like a jerk for thinking it because he probably looked tired too. Their eyes met across the cafe and Nicole's widened slightly, surprise flickering across her face, and Raymond realized with sinking certainty that Kevin hadn't told her about Harper. Nicole approached with a smile that looked uncertain around the edges, her gaze flicking between Raymond and Harper with visible confusion. When she reached the table, Raymond extended his hand, keeping his voice level. "I'm Ray. This is Harper. I hope you don't mind that I brought her. I should have mentioned it, but I didn't have your number, and Kevin is terrible at communication, so here we are." He was rambling, words spilling out faster than he could control them. Nicole shook his hand, her grip firm but brief. "Of course I don't mind," she said, and Raymond couldn't tell if she meant it. She looked down at Harper and smiled with more warmth. "Hi, Harper. I'm Nicole. I love your dress." Harper looked up from her coloring, assessed Nicole with brutal honesty only children could pull off, and said matter-of-factly, "Thank you. It has sunflowers. They were my mommy's favorite." The words landed like something heavy, too much information too fast, and Raymond watched Nicole's smile falter for just a fraction before resettling into something gentler. "Sunflowers are beautiful," Nicole said softly, and the simple acknowledgement without pity was exactly right. She pulled out the chair beside Harper and sat down, setting her bag on the floor. An awkward quiet descended, and Raymond felt panic rising because this was exactly what he'd feared, this terrible stretching silence. Nicole saved him by gesturing toward the counter. "Should we order? I could really use a coffee after the morning I've had." "Right, yes, coffee," Raymond said, standing too quickly, grateful for the task. "What would you like?" Nicole asked for just a latte, nothing fancy. And Raymond nodded and looked at Harper, who requested hot chocolate with whipped cream without looking up. Raymond escaped to the counter and joined the line, 4 people deep, which gave him time to collect himself. This was fine, he repeated like a mantra. He would order drinks, return to the table, make small talk for exactly 30 minutes, then claim Harper needed dinner and make his exit. Except when he glanced back at the table, he saw Nicole leaning over to look at Harper's coloring book, saying something that made his daughter smile, and something in Raymond's chest twisted uncomfortably. He ordered the drinks and carried them back on a small tray, distributed them around the table. "So," Raymond began, then stopped because what came after so? "Kevin mentioned you're an architect?" He fell back on the basics, on work talk because work was safe. Nicole corrected gently that she was a landscape architect, designed outdoor spaces mostly, parks and public gardens. "That must be interesting," Raymond said, which was possibly the most boring response in the history of conversations. Nicole's lips twitched like she wanted to smile, but was holding back. She asked what he did, and Raymond explained about educational technology and learning platforms, heard himself slipping into pitch mode until he caught himself. "It's mostly just code and spreadsheets," he amended. Nicole said helping kids mattered, that the work was important, and Raymond shrugged because he'd never thought about it that way. Another silence fell, heavier than the last, and Raymond checked his watch without meaning to. 3:07. "I design places where kids can just be kids," Nicole said suddenly, her voice softer. "No structure, no curriculum, just space to run and play and figure things out on their own. Sometimes I think we forget they need that." The observation was both gentle and pointed, and Raymond felt like she was saying something larger than just playground philosophy. "That's a very different philosophy from what I do," Raymond observed, the words coming out sharper than intended. Nicole took the edge without flinching, just sipped her latte, and said that different didn't mean opposed, that kids needed both guidance and freedom. Harper looked up and asked with genuine confusion if they were fighting. "No, sweetheart," Raymond said quickly, mortified. "We're just talking about work." Harper observed that it sounded like fighting, then returned to her coloring. Nicole laughed and said Harper was perceptive. "Too perceptive," Raymond muttered, then realized how that sounded. "I mean, she's very smart, sometimes too smart for her own good." Nicole said she thought that was a good quality, and Raymond felt himself relax fractionally, because Nicole wasn't judging Harper or finding her presence annoying. They fell back into careful conversation, topics so safe and boring that Raymond wanted to stand up and leave just to escape the tedium. But then Nicole suggested going to see a park she'd designed just 2 blocks away, said it had a really good slide and a sandbox, and Harper's head snapped up with interest. "Can we go, Daddy? Please?" Raymond found himself agreeing before his brain could catalogue all the reasons this was a bad idea. Nicole smiled like he'd done something right, and they gathered their things and headed out into October afternoon that had turned surprisingly beautiful. The walk was short, Harper skipping ahead while Raymond and Nicole followed at a measured pace. Nicole kept her hands tucked in her cardigan pockets and matched his pace automatically, and when Harper got too far ahead, Nicole was the one who called out gently for her to wait. The park opened up before them, and Raymond had to admit it was impressive. Half an acre of thoughtfully designed space with mature trees and playground equipment that looked both new and timeless. Wooden structures instead of plastic, with towers and bridges and a curved slide that looked legitimately fun. Harper ran ahead to the swings without waiting for permission, and Nicole pointed out details as they walked, how benches were positioned so parents could watch without hovering, how paths curved to create gathering spaces. "You designed this?" Raymond asked, surprise in his voice. Nicole nodded, and for the first time, Raymond saw genuine pride on her face. They reached the bench Nicole had pointed out and sat down, maintaining careful distance, both watching Harper swing higher with fearless abandon. Raymond felt something shift in the air between them, the awkwardness fading into something that might eventually become comfortable. Nicole started talking without prompting, words spilling out about how she used to think technology was cold until her grandmother got sick and video calls let them stay connected. She touched a ring on her right hand while she talked, spinning it absently, and Raymond catalogued this nervous habit. Nicole said her grandmother had given her the ring before dying, said it was for luck, though she wasn't sure it was working. "Why do you say that?" Raymond asked, the question coming out gentler than intended. Nicole met his eyes and said simply that she was 36, divorced, on a blind date where the guy had tried to leave after 10 minutes. Raymond winced with guilt. He apologized without planning to, said he wasn't usually this rude, that actually he wasn't usually anything because he was usually absent from situations like this entirely. Nicole asked what kind of situations, and Raymond heard himself say anything that required emotional availability, the words coming out before he could stop them. The confession hung between them too honest for strangers, and Raymond wanted to take it back. But Nicole just looked at him with understanding and asked what he'd been afraid of when he tried to leave. The question was so direct that Raymond's first instinct was to deflect. But Harper's words echoed in his mind. She looks lonely like you, and maybe his daughter was trying to tell him something important. Failing, Raymond said finally. At this, at being whatever you need me to be. Harper deserves someone who's whole, not someone still trying to figure out which pieces are missing. Nicole was quiet for a moment, and Raymond braced for platitudes. Instead, she said that her ex-husband had called her cold, said she cared more about strangers in parks than about him, and maybe he was right. She said she'd thrown herself into work after the divorce because designing connection felt safer than attempting it herself. But watching you with Harper today, Nicole continued, the way you pay attention to everything she does, the way you tried to protect her, even from me. I don't think you're failing. I think you've loved so much that you're afraid to love again. The observation landed with weight that made Raymond's chest feel tight and loose simultaneously. Before he could respond, Harper came running back, breathless and grinning, asking if Nicole would push her on the swings. Nicole looked at Raymond for permission, waiting for his nod before agreeing. Raymond watched them walk toward the swings hand in hand, his daughter and this woman who'd shown up expecting a date and gotten a single father with more baggage than seemed fair. Maybe Harper had been right. Maybe Nicole did look lonely. Maybe they both did. Maybe seeing that in each other was the whole point. The afternoon stretched longer than Raymond had planned, 30 minutes becoming 60, becoming 90. They fell into easier conversation now, the initial awkwardness burned away by honesty. Nicole told him about projects and clients, about the neighborhood that had fought for 3 years to fund this park. Raymond found himself telling her about starting the company after Rebecca died, because working 18-hour days was easier than sitting alone in a house full of memories. Nicole listened without judgment, asked questions that showed she was actually hearing him. Harper came back periodically with treasures, a particularly good stick, a smooth rock, a leaf shaped like a heart, and each time Nicole examined these offerings with genuine interest. She asked Harper questions about the stick's potential uses and the rock's origins, engaging with his daughter as a full person rather than just a child who happened to be present. Raymond watched these interactions with growing awareness that something important was happening, something beyond casual politeness. "Can we get ice cream?" Harper asked suddenly, appearing beside the bench with flushed cheeks and wild hair. Raymond checked his watch, nearly 5, and started to say no. But Harper deployed her most effective weapon, wide, hopeful eyes, and Raymond felt his resistance crumble. "Fine, but just one scoop." Harper whooped and grabbed Nicole's hand, explaining about the amazing shop down the street. The ice cream shop was small and crowded, full of families taking advantage of October's last warmth. They ordered chocolate for Harper, strawberry for Nicole, vanilla for Raymond because he was boring and had accepted this. They found a table outside, and Raymond realized with surprise that he was having a good time, that the afternoon he'd dreaded had become something approaching pleasant. "This is nice," Nicole said, and Raymond agreed because it was nice, sitting in autumn sunshine eating ice cream. Harper got chocolate on her nose, and Nicole reached over with a napkin to wipe it off before Raymond could, the gesture casual and parental in a way that made Raymond's throat tight. Harper didn't even pause in her story, just accepted the help, and Raymond saw how easily Nicole could fit into their lives, how naturally she already did. After ice cream, they returned to the park, and the afternoon continued its slow stretch toward evening. The sun lowered gradually, casting long shadows, turning everything golden. Harper convinced Nicole to push her on the swings again, which Nicole did with patient good humor. Raymond sat on the bench with his phone, a text from Kevin asking how things were going. He typed back simply that she made Harper happy, which was true, but incomplete. Kevin responded asking, "What about you?" and Raymond looked at Nicole and Harper, at the way light caught in Nicole's hair, at the sound of his daughter's laughter, and typed back, "Yeah, me too." He pocketed his phone and walked over to join them, standing beside Nicole and helping push, their hands occasionally brushing in a way that felt both accidental and inevitable. The playground gradually emptied as parents collected tired children, and Raymond knew they should leave too, that Harper had school tomorrow, but he was reluctant to end this, reluctant to return to their usual Saturday evening. He wanted to hold on to this afternoon a little longer. "We should probably head home," Raymond said finally, reluctantly, when Harper's yawns became too frequent. His daughter protested that she wasn't tired, then undermined her claim with another enormous yawn that made Nicole laugh. They walked back to the parking area together, and when they reached Nicole's car, Raymond felt that awkward moment of goodbye stretching between them. "Thank you for coming," Raymond said. "Again, Harper really enjoys spending time with you." The words were inadequate. Nicole smiled and said she enjoyed it too. Both of them. Nicole looked at Harper, who was leaning heavily against Raymond's leg, fighting sleep. "Maybe next week we could do something different, if you're interested." Raymond thought about his Sunday morning routine, about coffee and breakfast and careful solitude, about the ways he'd structured his life to be predictable and safe. Agreeing meant disrupting all of that. "Okay," Raymond heard himself say. "Sunday morning. What time?" Nicole suggested 9 and mentioned a farmer's market downtown, good coffee and fresh pastries, and Raymond agreed before overthinking could stop him. Nicole offered to pick them up, and Raymond accepted despite the intimacy that implied. Nicole hugged Harper goodbye, and Raymond watched his daughter accept the embrace like it was natural. Then Nicole looked at Raymond, and he thought she might hug him too, but she just smiled and said, "See you Sunday." Raymond drove home while Harper dozed in the back seat, worn out from playing and ice cream. That evening, after carrying Harper upstairs and tucking her into bed, Raymond stood in his kitchen and stared at Rebecca's yellow mug sitting in the dish rack where he'd placed it that morning. He picked it up, felt its familiar weight, the chip on the handle that Rebecca had refused to replace. 4 years of sitting unused in a cabinet, suspended between past and present. He ran his fingers over the chip and thought about Rebecca, about how she would have told Raymond to stop being afraid and just live. That had been Rebecca's gift, her ability to move through life with openness and joy. After she died, Raymond realized too late he'd never learned how to do what she made look effortless. Raymond filled the mug with hot water and soap, washed it gently, dried it with care. Then, instead of putting it back in the cabinet, he set it on the counter, not to use yet, but to see, to acknowledge that hiding it hadn't made the past go away. His phone buzzed with a text from Nicole, thanking him for a great afternoon, saying Harper was wonderful and he wasn't so bad either, followed by a smiley face. Raymond stared at that emoji longer than was reasonable, seeing in it a glimpse of who Nicole was. He typed back that Harper wanted to tell her she was making a drawing, added that he hadn't burned anything because Nicole had been watching. Nicole responded with gratitude and a joke about kitchen safety, and they texted while Raymond moved through his evening routine, small observations and gentle humor, nothing profound but somehow significant. At one point, Nicole asked how Harper was, and Raymond glanced upstairs where his daughter slept. "She's good," he typed. We're good. And it was true, or moving toward truth in a way that felt possible if still fragile. They said goodnight eventually, Nicole sending a simple, sweet dreams that Raymond returned with only slight hesitation. He climbed the stairs to check on Harper one final time, found her deeply asleep, curled around her stuffed rabbit. Raymond smoothed her hair back gently and thought about the afternoon, about how Harper had seen what he couldn't, about how his daughter kept teaching him things. In his own bed, Raymond lay awake longer than usual, mind circling the day's events, trying to make sense of how coffee and a park and ice cream had cracked open something he thought he'd sealed shut. He felt vulnerable and exposed, like he'd removed armor that had been protecting him but also weighing him down. His phone buzzed once more, Nicole texting goodnight again, and Raymond looked at the message glowing in the darkness and let himself imagine what it might mean if he let this continue. The week passed in familiar rhythm, work and school pickup and dinner and bedtime, the routine Raymond relied on. But underneath something had shifted, the weekend having created cracks in the foundation he'd built so carefully. He and Nicole texted throughout the week, more frequently now, falling into easy conversation. She sent photos of her park project, asked his opinion even though he knew nothing about landscape architecture. He found himself telling her about work frustrations, receiving thoughtful responses that showed she was actually listening. Harper asked constantly about Nicole, when they'd see her again, questions Raymond deflected with maybes because committing to future felt dangerous. Kevin noticed at work, commented that Raymond seemed different, lighter, and Raymond denied it while knowing the denial was obvious. By Friday, Raymond found himself looking forward to the weekend with anticipation. Nicole had suggested a movie on Saturday, something kid-friendly, and Raymond had agreed. Now Saturday morning arrived, and he was back in his closet trying to decide what to wear like it mattered. He settled on blue because that's what he always chose. They met at the theater, Harper running to where Nicole waited, and Raymond watched his daughter hug Nicole without hesitation. They bought tickets and popcorn and found seats, Harper between the adults. The movie was animated, something about dragons, and Harper was entranced while Raymond's attention divided between the screen and the woman on his daughter's other side. Nicole caught him looking once and smiled, and Raymond felt heat rise, but Nicole just returned to the movie like it was normal. When credits rolled, Harper declared it the best movie ever, which she said about every movie. Ice cream? Nicole suggested, and Harper agreed before Raymond could point out they'd just had popcorn. They got ice cream and found a bench, eating while people passed. Can we do this every weekend? Harper asked through chocolate, and Raymond felt panic because every weekend implied commitment and future. But Nicole just said she'd like that if Raymond was okay with it, turning the question to him. Raymond looked at Harper's hopeful face, at Nicole's patient expression. Yeah, he heard himself say. I think we can do that. Harper whooped, and Nicole smiled wider, and Raymond felt simultaneously terrified and relieved. They walked back toward parking, Harper running ahead, leaving Raymond and Nicole side by side. Nicole's hand brushed his accidentally, and Raymond caught it without thinking, held it for just a moment before self-consciousness made him let go. Thank you, Nicole said quietly, for letting me be part of this. Raymond shook his head because she had it backward. He was the one who should be grateful. They drove home and Raymond texted Nicole that evening asking about breakfast tomorrow. Nicole responded quickly that she'd love to, and they made plans like it was the simplest thing. Sunday morning, Nicole arrived with coffee and pastries, and the gesture felt thoughtful in a way that made Raymond's throat tight. They had breakfast at Raymond's table, and Raymond marveled at how quickly this had become normal, how 3 weekends had created patterns that felt established. After breakfast, Harper wanted to show Nicole her rock collection, which meant they all went upstairs, where his daughter explained in elaborate detail the origin story of each rock, most of which she'd made up but told with conviction. Nicole listened attentively, asking questions, and Raymond leaned against the doorframe, watching and feeling emotion he couldn't name. They spent the rest of the morning at Raymond's house. No plans, just existing together comfortably. Nicole helped Harper with a puzzle while Raymond caught up on email, and later they all went for a walk, Harper running ahead to pet dogs. Raymond and Nicole walked side by side, conversation flowing easily. That evening after Nicole left, Raymond stood in his kitchen looking at the yellow mug on the counter. He picked it up, felt its weight, and for the first time in 4 years, he considered using it. Not yet, he decided, but maybe soon. He opened the cabinet and placed the mug inside, but not in the back where it had lived for years. In front, with the others, available, part of the rotation, ready to be used when the time felt right. In the living room, Harper's drawing sat on the coffee table, 3 people holding hands, none of them fading now, all solid and present. Raymond picked it up, studied the way Harper had drawn them connected. A unit. Maybe, he thought. Maybe this was possible. Upstairs he checked on Harper, found her curled around her rabbit. He smoothed her hair and whispered, "I love you." But her small voice stopped him. "Daddy? I thought you were asleep." "Almost. Did you have a good time today?" "I did, sweetheart." "With Nicole?" "Yes, with Nicole." Harper smiled without opening her eyes. "Good, Mommy would be happy." Raymond's throat went tight. "What makes you say that?" "Because you're happy. And Mommy always wanted you to be happy, she told me." Raymond sat on the edge of Harper's bed, emotions churning. "I miss her," he said quietly. "Me too," Harper agreed. "But I think maybe it's okay to miss her and also be happy about Nicole. Like both things can be true at the same time." "When did you get so wise?" Raymond asked. "I was born this way," Harper said matter-of-factly, making Raymond laugh. "Now go to bed, Daddy. You need sleep before next weekend." "Yes, Mom," Raymond said, kissing her forehead. In his own room, Raymond lay in bed thinking about everything that had changed in just 3 weeks, thinking about Nicole's smile and Harper's wisdom, and the way the future suddenly felt less like something to fear. His phone buzzed one last time. Nicole sending sweet dreams, and for the first time in 4 years, Raymond thought they might be. He typed back the same, adding after brief hesitation, a smiley face that felt awkward, but also like a small act of courage. Nicole sent back a heart emoji, and Raymond stared at it before setting his phone aside. He thought about the yellow mug in the cabinet, ready now instead of hidden. He thought about Harper's drawing where all 3 figures stood solid, none fading. He thought about how his daughter had taught him that both things could be true at the same time, that missing Rebecca and welcoming Nicole weren't contradictions but layers of a life that was finally, slowly, carefully opening back up. Raymond closed his eyes, and for the first time in years, he didn't fight sleep, didn't resist the dreams that might come. Instead, he let himself drift, thinking about farmers' markets and ice cream and the sound of his daughter's laughter mixing with someone else's, thinking about how loneliness didn't disappear in a moment, but faded gradually, day by day, weekend by weekend, one small act of courage at a time, until one morning you woke up and realized that the walls you'd built so carefully weren't protecting you anymore. They were just keeping you alone, and maybe, just maybe, it was finally time to let someone in.